Hey guys, this video is just going to be kind of me rambling for a bit. I finally finished part 1 of my novel that I've been working on and off for like 4 years. When I wrote my first novel, I had so much more free time. I only worked 3 days a week. I dropped out of college for multiple reasons, like driving to university was draining my mental health, and university itself was just incredibly draining, and yeah, I was just miserable. So yeah, I stopped going to university, and so that plus only working 3 days a week meant I had a lot of free time, and I thought I'm going to pursue something I'm passionate about, my dreams. So I wrote my first novel, and it was tough, but I had so much free time. So these last 4 years, I've been working more, and I've had more responsibilities and less free time. I've also been dedicating a lot more of my time to content creation, which in itself has also been a really tough journey. So after 4 years on and off, I finally finished part 1. I decided that I'm going to break it into 2 parts, and I realized I made a mistake, because when I wrote this new novel, when I started this new novel, I wanted it to be short and self-contained, because my first novel was like almost 150,000 words, which was like way too much for someone's first novel. Publishers didn't want to touch it, agents didn't want to touch it. It was too much to invest in a new writer. So I get it. And I think the version that I was sending to agents wasn't great. It took me a couple more years to get it to a place where like I'm really proud of my first novel. I might as well mention it now in case people ask. It's called OREGONIA and the Legend of the Meese. It's about these mythical creatures called Meese who go on a grand adventure across the realm of OREGONIA to save their home from an ancient darkness that hasn't been seen since the fall of mankind. It's great. I'm very proud of it. I don't know if I can say the same for my new book, because it's just it's hard to put my finger on. I made the same mistake writing this new book that I did with my first book. So this one, OREGONIA, I wrote like a very rough summary of ideas. Like I had some free time during one of my classes to like write, and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna summarize a story that I can turn into a bigger story. And after a couple years, I decided to turn that into a book. I remember sitting in the common areas at university in between classes, just really bummed and unmotivated to do my college work, my university work. So I started writing the first couple chapters of my novel, and I decided that this is what I want to do. I should make a video about like my story and my journey, about that some other time. But a lot of my first book, a lot of it was just me making shit up along the way. And for a simpler story like this, it's a really big book, but it's fairly simple, and it's linear, except for like a couple flashbacks. But that just makes the linear stuff more relevant. So I just went with the flow in this story, and I made things up as I went along, and I didn't diverge too much from like the summary I had built. but I did make some significant changes, especially near the end, and added new characters, and it evolved into something I love dearly. But for this new story, I had this idea. I wrote like a summary of what I wanted, and then it just started taking all these different turns. And I think part of the problem was I tried to implement like an overarching mystery, and that might have been my problem, because you for something like that you really have to plan. You have to plan something like that out from the onset, and I kind of worked it backwards. I kind of had this mystery and developed this mystery as I went along, and without establishing enough near the beginning. So that's one of the problems. It was supposed to be a short, self-contained story, but by the time I finished, I knew at this point it was really long. So I said, okay, this is going to be part 1. And then I put it all into a single document, and it ended up being 140,000 words. It's nearly as long as my first book. It's longer than the first draft of my first book. And it's not, and like, I could probably punch out another 100,000 words. And I'm making this sound like a bad thing. It's not really a bad thing. I just ended up writing a story that was supposed to be a short, self-contained story, and now it's basically going to be 2 books. And that was not my goal at all. But I just kept writing and writing and writing, which is my problem with my first book. I couldn't stop coming up with new ideas, and I'm making this sound like a bad thing, but I feel like people in the comments are going to say, no, that's good. And I think it is a good thing, because in both cases, their newer, better ideas came about. But it wasn't my goal for my new book, which I haven't even set a name for. Like, I've been wafting on a name, like the Silent Drifter, or like Adrift in the Nexus or something. I guess I could finally talk about what it is. It's about this girl named Lucina who attains the power to travel to different realms of existence through the Nexus. The Nexus being this force that connects all the realities together. The Nexus is everything. And drifters have the power to travel to and from different realms by going through the Nexus. No drifter has the ability to travel back to the realm they came from, because they do not attain the power to do so until they've actually entered the Nexus. There's more to it than that, but the whole point is that, like, Lucina wants to go back home so she can take care of her father, but she can't. No drifter has, like, the innate ability to go back. They can travel to places that they've been, so they can discover new places, absorb that realm's nexium, and they can travel back to that realm. It's easier to find. But they don't. Their bodies can't register like the new nexium and sort of log, quote unquote, log that realm until after they have the power to become a drifter. And they can't become a drifter. They don't become a drifter until they've entered the Nexus. So it's kind of just a long, convoluted way to say that, like, almost no drifter ever makes it back to the realm from which they came, because there's like infinite realms, and to find like yours is next to impossible. It's all relevant because it's Lucina's motivation. That's why I'm going into the details. She wants to get back home. It's her driving motivation. For some drifters, it's their driving motivation. For a lot of them, they accept the fact that they can't go back, or for a lot of them, it's too shitty and traumatizing that they don't want to go back. And then this story sort of just snowballed into more and more and more. And there are a few aspects of it that, like, how do I phrase this? There are a few aspects of this story that I'm not really a fan of. I kind of was going with the flow, and experimenting with new ways of telling stories that I wasn't, or that were new to me. Usually I write, like my first novel, it's very plot driven. The plot is happening, the characters react to this plot. This story becomes one in which it's more character driven, because there's an end goal, but she can't actively follow a through line to that goal. She's just trying to master her powers, so she has control over them, and all of that leads to being able to survive successfully as a drifter in the vast and infinite realms of the Nexus, all while trying to slowly work towards that unattainable goal of going back home. Drifters usually call, like, whatever their goal they set is for like the rest of their life, they call it their journey. And for Lucina, her journey is the journey back home, which nearly all drifters are not successful in attaining. So a lot of them don't make that their goal. But Lucina's father is important to her. They have this codependency, or at least Lucina believes that there's like, she believes her father needs her as much as she needs her father. And it's more complicated than that. This story just ended up being so much longer than I intended, and for me that's sad, because I really wanted to. The whole point of this was so people can experience my work in a more digestible manner, and I failed on that front. And I think, and I really like the idea of like characters going on a journey, going to new places, experiencing new things, fighting interesting new characters or monsters or the quote-unquote bosses. But this story, she's contained at this school for so long, and she's going to all these different classes and learning all these different lessons, all these lessons which will be incorporated near the end of part 1, and especially near the end of, I guess, what I'm calling part 2. Part 2, I think I can make significantly shorter. I don't want to match part 1. This is hard to talk about, because like I have all these feelings and I'm conflicted, but I feel like at the same time I shouldn't be. Like, I finished part 1. This was like my goal for like the last few months. I knew this story was going to be too big, so I decided I'm going to finish part 1, and I'm going to release it for free for people to read and critique, and to essentially, I need beta readers, and hopefully I can flesh it out into something I can be more proud of with the help of my community and the broader internet. I also think that people might make some connections to a very successful, very good show called The Owl House. Now, this was kind of another reason that I was like, it made me want to it made me kind of want to toss the whole story almost, because although my story, when you really break it down, is very different from the Owl House, there's some odd similarities between like the main characters and it made me feel so stupid and unoriginal. I think it'll be fun to talk about. So let me tell you guys. So both situations are essentially isekai, right? Luz Noseda from the Owl House, she goes to the demon realm, and she gets a mentor and even goes to a magical school. You know, it's kind of riffing on Harry Potter a bit. Harry Potter was something I thought about when writing my story, but Luz Noseda is at least half Latino. I'm not sure what her full spectrum of ethnicity is, but my character, whose name is Lucina Femont, she is also half Mexican, and she's called Lucy, and Luz is loose. So they have similar ethnic backgrounds, and even their names are sort of similar. Luz as a character is more quirky and outgoing. Lucina is less so. She's a nervous wreck who tries to hide her nerves and anxiety over being quirky. Whereas I think Luz is genuinely quirky and funny and weird. Another, like, a big difference is that Lucina communicates through ASL. She speaks sign language, and I thought that would be kind of interesting because it's a workaround. She has to work around her disability to use her powers. Because when drifters use their powers, they are calling out to the Nexus. Their voices change and reverberate because they're being influenced by Nexium. So they conjure these spells through saying these sort of incoherent phrases. But Lucina can't do that because she cannot speak. But it's less about speaking, and it's more about calling out to the Nexus is more about your intentions and the vibes you're putting out. So she can still call out to the Nexus through her signs. So instead of conjuring spells through words, like say a wizard might, she's got more of like a Naruto situation where she kind of does like the hand signs. And I thought that would make her more interesting because she, in some ways, she's got like an advantage. She can call out to the Nexus silently, which is something only like really powerful masters can do. Say like a master drifter. They can call it to the Nexus with their minds, essentially. They become so good and so in tune with their abilities, and their connection to the Nexus is so strong that eventually they can perform their most basic powers without uttering words. So, and I thought it would be like just interesting to explore a character who speaks through sign. And I had to come up with some interesting ways to depict that in a written form, since ASL is very, is visual. But describing some hand signs. One of the things I want to go back through and describe more hand signs and make them more accurate. I have a couple sign language books. I've been trying to learn sign language on and off for a few months now. I find it very interesting, and I thought it'd be fun to write a character like that. I'm very conflicted about this story. Partway through, I realized a more interesting way I could have told this story. that would have fit my writing style better. And then I just felt so stupid. There's no reason she had to be stuck at this school for such a decent chunk. She goes places and visits places, but there could have been, I could have made an aspect of the story where she was like, the school didn't have to be so prominent. She could have been going to and experiencing more interesting places in an adventure style fashion. Kind of like how the new Pokemon games, you go to school for like a few months, it skips over that part, and then they go on their adventure, and that adventure is kind of whatever they want it to be. It could be completing the Pokédex, to becoming the champion, or just doing research. It's like whatever their goal is. I could have done something similar to that, and then I realized how cool would it have been if like we had like a time skip and she was hardened by her time in the Nexus. And I'm going to implement something like that in part 2 because I find that idea so much more interesting. I'm kind of excited for part 2. But I have this other story I've been working on. Like, just, I've been writing down ideas, and I've written down the first couple chapters. And it's something I think I'm very passionate about, that I want to build a world, and I want to write out all the details of that world and its characters before I really do the deep dive into the novel aspect. I really want to plan it out and have a lot of stuff planned out before then. Like, I don't want to make it up as I go along. Not with this next story I want to write, because I want the lore and the world building to be deep and coherent and consistent, which I did not do for my first 2 books. I think it worked out for OREGONIA, for the Silent Drifter, name not final. It was less so. I had to go back and twist things around and rework things to make the world building a little more consistent. So I feel like obviously I made a lot of mistakes writing my first book, but I feel like I made even more writing my second. And I think I've learned a lot from those experiences. And I don't think it's obviously, after I completed my first draft of my first novel, I spent like a couple of years really fleshing it out. And then it drew the eyes of an editor, and she took the liberty of editing it. So I released an even better version with more content that has had a more professional edited bent to it. And this is like the definitive version of my novel. And I spent a lot of money on like art and cover art, like hundreds of dollars. And I can't really afford to do that this time around. However, I do want to get like a piece of art, like just a cover art, not back cover or chapter art, anything like that. I want for the Silent Drifter. I mean, I'm going to make a cover, and I'm going to let everybody know that this is like an unfinished story. This is part 1, and there's still some issues with it, but I'm releasing it for free. You guys can read it in its entirety, edit it. You can help me edit and critique it, and give me advice and all that stuff. And I want to flesh it out and make it the best version of it can be. But I don't really have the time to do that. So I'm kind of hoping that, because there's still enough story and there's still enough there that I think a lot of people can get a lot of value out of it, while also putting in their input and helping me build it into something I can be more proud of. I have some really good ideas for part 2. I keep telling myself it's not going to be as long, but that's what I said about part 1. So we'll see. I hope you guys enjoy the Silent Drifter, or whatever I decide to call it. And maybe you can, in the comments below, tell me where you like to read your stories, your free content. I was probably gonna upload it on Wattpad, but please tell me where all of your favorite places are, and I'll try to upload it to those places. Sorry this was so rambly. I finished it last night, and I just felt like I had to talk about it, and get my vibes out there. Yeah, I mean, I'm not really sure what else to say. I'm still tired. My son woke up in the middle of the night a few times, but man, I did it. I finished it. I said I would finish part 1. I told myself I wanted to finish it before my son was born, and then I wanted to finish it before I went back to work. And it's the first week of work. This is my first week. I finished my novel. I was only a week behind. And I really did it. I really finished part 1, and it only took me 4 years. I guess my goal is to make part 2 half as long. So maybe 70,000 words. I think I can pull that off. I think so. Alright guys. Thanks for watching. I super duper appreciate it. Like, comment, subscribe. All that cool stuff. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.